So the configuration, the one upon the throne, the four living beings, the 24 elders, the seven spirits of God as being summed up in the menorah. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. So we want to talk about the identity of the 24 elders. Who are they? They are major characters in the narrative, and as I'm going to suggest, you don't have a prayer of really understanding the 144,000, whom we have not met yet, if we don't understand the 24 elders. Now, some folks will say that the 24 elders are not angelic beings, that they are humans. Well, why do they say that? Well, because we do have 24 names that show up later at the end of the book. The New Jerusalem, 12 names of the sons of Israel are on the gates, and 12 names of the apostles are on the foundation stones of the city. And it's like, oh, this is them. This is the 12 sons of Jacob and the 12 apostles. And they say, well, they're called elders. Elder is a word that's used throughout the New Testament in a number of places for leaders of the churches. So surely we could call the apostles elders. This is the 12 apostles and the 12 sons of Jacob. Now, the problem here is, quite frankly, that there's just so much better evidence to suggest that the 24 elders are heavenly beings, that they are angelic. I'll give you a couple that are especially important, where the 24 elders are looking at the church and they regard them as a distinct body, right? They, them. They talk about the church in the third person because they're not the church. Revelation 5:9, they are singing, "Worthy are you to take the book," etc. You've purchased for God with your blood from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. And he says, you have made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth. Now notice they don't say we. They don't say us. If these guys are, foundational members of the church, why do they look at the church and say, well, these are the benefits you're going to give to them? Right? It should be first person plural. And by the way, this is why you should always use a modern translation, because the King James Bible, which is based upon late manuscripts that are known to be very corrupt from the medieval period, and they especially had bad copies of Revelation. Right? It's very unfortunate. Those late copies have a corruption here where the 24 elders say, we, us, we're going to reign. And it throws the whole thing off. You'll never get to the bottom of who the 24 elders are if you're using a translation based on bad manuscripts. Now, the modern translations won't do this. This is just a problem for the King James Bible. And I think it's especially important for me to say that for a lesson that's going on YouTube, because you would think the King James movement is gone, but it's not. Like, I get something from these guys at least like twice a month. Another instance that he's talking to an elder, he's looking at the martyrs of Christ. He says, those who are clothed in white robes, who are they? And where have they come from? The elder is asking John. And John says to him, my Lord, you know. Right? He's talking to him like he's somebody above him, my Lord, kurios, a word that usually characterizes Jesus, though it can be used in other ways too. And he said to me, these are the ones who have come out of the great tribulation, and they, again, third person, have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So why then are they called elders? Well, there is this mixture thing going on. We've talked a lot before, and we will talk more about how this book has a dualistic anthropology. That is, we have two humanities who are fighting each other. We have angelic humanity, those who follow the Lamb, and we have beastly humanity. That is, those who follow the beast. Right? He has two versions of humanity, and it's humanity who are upgrading themselves to angelic status, and then there's humanity that are downgrading themselves to animal status when they follow the beast and persecute the church. Well, it's interesting. We have seen that the pastors of the seven churches are referred to as angels. And then we get to these 24 angelic characters, and they're referred to as elders, which is like human language, right? And so this exchange of titles is part and parcel to John's communication that the church is destined to be on this council, to be on the heavenly council, to be upgraded to angel status. And it's also interesting that the angels who reign over the world right now will not reign in the age to come. It says that plainly in Hebrews chapter 1. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 that we're going to reign over the angels. This is part of the great reversal that's coming. You know how Jesus always says the first will be last and the last will be first, like he really means it. The angels and humans, they're getting swapped. So one of my rules is that you don't hit people with like 7 or 8 passages from the Old Testament in a row. But we got to do that. So I'll try not to linger, try not to make it hard. But since we've encountered the divine council here, I told you guys when we were in the introduction that at some point we need to really look at the divine council to understand who they are and to recognize that we have encountered them throughout the Bible, right? So that's where we're at now. These 24 elders, they're in lots of places. They're all over the Bible. They're not described as 24. We'll talk about the number later. But we have met them before. And it's not God in the Bible just sitting on a throne making direct sovereign choices about what's going on in the world. He delegates a council to make these choices. And one day we'll be members of this council. And so about this council. Well, first of all, it's mentioned in passing a number of places, such as in Job. Have you listened in the counsel of God? Right? It's just assumed, it's well known that God has a counsel. Here's one in Psalm 89. For who in the skies who can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? A God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him. Now, this holy ones is the word that usually gets translated saints, right? When you're reading in the New Testament and you get to a passage that talks about the church as the saints, it's saying holy ones. And when you read this term saints, almost inevitably you have the wrong idea about what that means. Saint is not a moral word primarily, right? When you meet the word saint, it doesn't mean somebody who's just really moral, right? We get these images of like people living in the monastery who never smile because they take their holiness so seriously. That is not what it means. If you follow holy ones throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament, you find that holy ones is a reference to this cosmic government, to those who rule over creation. So when the New Testament writers call us the saints, they call us the holy ones, that is primarily a statement about our destiny to join the government, the cosmic government. The same thing with ecclesia, with church. Ecclesia is a government word, right? In Greek democracies, there were representatives of the polis, of the city, who would go out and there were an assembly that made government decisions for the rest of the polis, right? So the main ways we get referred to in the New Testament, ecclesia comes from a Greek-style government, and the holy ones is the Old Testament term for God's heavenly council. Now, there is, of course, a moral denotation to that, right? Because if you are not moral, then you're not fit to rule. But that's not the first place you should go when you see the term holy ones. We see holy ones used in the Psalms. We see it in the book of Daniel. We see it all sorts of places. When Paul says, do you not know that the holy ones, do you not know that the saints shall rule the world? He's thinking about the words he's using right there in 1 Corinthians 6. That's the first denotation of holy one or saint, somebody who reigns on the heavenly council. The moral stuff is secondary. It's necessary, but it's not the primary meaning. God has taken up his place in the divine council. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? So now we're finding out that there are members of this council who are fallen, who have problems. Some of these angels get worshipped as though they are gods by the nations. Selah, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you should die. Well, why is that such a profound thing to say? Well, because as angelic spirits, they weren't supposed to ever die, right? But because they are fallen, like men, they shall die, and we will take their place. The divine council is important because part of what they do is they interact with the prophets. They commission prophets. They place messages in the mouths of the prophets. It's not just God prophet, right? There's this intermediary thing going on. Just like the Bible says the law of Moses was given through angels. It says that several times. Look at this scene where the prophet is speaking in 1 Kings 22. And he says, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him, and on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. So the council debates. God doesn't just tell them what to do. God chooses. I mean, he doesn't need a council, but he chooses a council. He doesn't need a church, but he chooses a church. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And then God says, well, how are you going to do this? And then God says, okay, do that. And that's what takes place. And then the prophets start saying a certain thing as what was dictated by the council. And I heard, this is Isaiah's commission, and I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. Isaiah is not just commissioned by the Lord, he's commissioned by the Lord and his council. The most important council passage for the book of Revelation is in Daniel chapter 4, because John is using this anthropology of human angels versus human beasts. All right, I said this a moment ago. Well, there's only one place in Revelation where angels face off with a man who's been reduced to beast status, and it's Nebuchadnezzar. I was looking in the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one. There it is again, that saint language, a holy one. This is someone who's going to make a big decision about how things are run in the world. He descended from heaven, and he says to Nebuchadnezzar, you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox. The sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones. So we get to this council, these guys on thrones who have crowns. Obviously, they have authority. That's what a throne and a crown means. And we're like, well, where did these guys come from? Well, we've seen them many, many times throughout Scripture. They just weren't always described with exactly the same language every time. They don't just rule, they're priests. They're burning incense, playing harps. These are the things that priests do in God's presence. What's interesting in Chronicles, we get a description of the temple in Jerusalem, which is modeled after the one in heaven. And what do we find? The priesthood at the temple is divided into 24 divisions. So 24 elders for the 24 divisions of the priesthood. It's a symbolic number. The scene here is of John the Baptist's father. He's burning incense, and the angel appears to him, right? Well, he's from the 8th division, the division of Abijah. In fact, trying to figure out what time of the year these divisions were doing their thing in the temple can tell us what time of the year Jesus was born. Because when this happens, when Abijah, the division of Abijah, is active in the temple in Jerusalem, well, that's when Mary is in her 3rd month of pregnancy. So 6 months later, you get the birth of Jesus. One more possibility. The 24 is a shot at Domitian. I've said that this throne room scene is meant to upstage Caesar. And we think that Domitian was the Caesar at the time that Revelation is written in about the mid-90s of the 1st century. Well, lictors are these guys who go with the emperor and with some governors, and they have incredible authority. For example, they can put people to death without a trial. There are not many Roman officials who can do that, but a lictor could do it. Well, Emperor Nero was seen as excessive when he had 12 lictors, right, to like glorify himself. He's walking around with these 12 lictors. Well, Domitian was known for having 24 lictors, right? Became extremely excessive about this. And I'm not going to read everything that Cassius Dio says about him after he dies. Here he's just emphasizing that Domitian liked to be flattered, but if you flattered him, then he didn't like you. If you didn't flatter him, then he thought you were contemptuous, and you can't get along with Domitian. He's got that temperament. And then he says he obtained the right to employ 24 lictors in the triumphal garb whenever he entered the Senate house. So to find that the divine council here is 24 members, and to see that at least with this one historian, he says that Domitian was known for glorifying himself with 24 lictors. There may be a polemic taking place here. Here's what they look like. They carry these rods with an axe handle sticking out of them.
So that's only in Revelation, right?
What?
The 24, the mocking Domitian.
Well, there are counter-imperial things elsewhere in the New Testament.
But the other references to God's counsel and that aren't mocking.
They never say 24. Yeah, they never use the language of 24 elders. So we're trying to figure out why 24. What could be the divisions of the priesthood? It could be that he had 24 lictors, and so this is a response to Domitian. And it could be a numerical thing. In fact, this is the thing I'm most confident about. We'll talk about it later. I think it's too much right now. But Revelation is trying to get us to understand that prior to the ascension of Jesus and before the bad guys were thrown out at Jesus' ascension, there would have been 36 seats. Well, 36 is a number, as we'll see, that's important because of its relationship to 666. But after you get rid of the negative element of the council, after a third of angels leave, we're left with 24 seats. Well, in Revelation, when something multiplies into a different number that's used, they're connected, right? This is a book that is built on mathematical composition. And 24 is a factor of 144, right? I've been saying that the 144,000 are angelic humanity that's going to join this council of the 24 elders. Well, 24 times 6 times the number of man equals 144. So there seems to be a numerical thing going on here. 144 and 666 are opposites in this book. There used to be 36 thrones, which 36 is the triangular basis for 666. We'll talk about what that means later. And 24 is a factor of 144. So these two numbers are against each other, 144 and 666, but they're both connected to other numbers. When we go through the number story of Revelation, we'll do that probably in chapter 14, because by then we've been through the 144,000, we've been through the mark of the beast, and we'll be in a better place to understand what I'm talking about. All right, I said a lot, so I'm just here are the takeaways, right? Just a simplification. 1 negative point, 4 positive points. They're not human. They are the heavenly council. The 144,000 will join their ranks. 24 divisions of the heavenly priesthood. Polemic against Domitian's 24 lictors. The top 3, I'm positive about. Those are right. The bottom 2, probably right. Hard to be sure. If you're interested in the role of the divine council in relationship to the gospel and the church, these are the books to read from Michael Heiser. The one on the left, The Unseen Realm, is really detailed. If you want a deep dive, that's the one you read. If you just want the gist and you want it very readable, you read the one on the right. Supernatural, what the Bible teaches about the unseen world and why it matters.